Good afternoon, morning, whenever it is for you, 7th grade. It's Monday afternoon for me. Real quick, here's the posters. Palm Sunday, Holy Monday, Holy Tuesday, there's a map, Holy Wednesday, Monday, Thursday, or Holy Friday, or Good Friday. Friday of Holy Week, okay, let me get that frozen there, is known as Good Friday or Holy Friday. I can't hold it and read worth anything. On this day, Jesus was arrested, put on trial. Actually, that's not completely accurate. Depends on who you talk to, whether he was arrested Friday morning, Thursday night. But he was arrested, put on trial, beaten, tortured, and then crucified with two other criminals on Golgotha, the place of the skull. After hanging on the cross and being tortured for hours, Jesus finally gave up his spirit, and darkness covered the earth. And I love this picture they have there. I don't know if loved is the right word, but it's a really good picture because that gives you an idea of what the crown of thorns would have been like. Like I said, we're not talking just any old thorns, we're talking huge ones. About the 9th hour, that means about 3 o'clock after he had been on the cross for a very long time, for hours, Jesus cried out in a loud voice. Once again, I am not going to try to pronounce the Aramaic there, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? When some of those standing there heard this, they said, he's calling Elijah. Immediately, one of them ran and got a sponge. He filled it with wine vinegar, put it on his stick, and offered it to Jesus to drink. The rest said, now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to save him. And when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook and the rocks split. And that's in Matthew, which we talked about yesterday. Holy Saturday, which we'll talk about later on today. That's later on in Matthew 27, the day that Jesus rested in the tomb, which provides appropriate symbolism of the seventh day being the day of rest, and then Easter Sunday, which we'll talk about on Thursday when hopefully you will be back in person. Flipping you around. Sorry, but there's just not a good way to do this without me ending up walking across the room. Sorry if you get motion sickness with videos that are bouncing while I'm doing it. There we go. Okay, so on today, like I said, is Monday for me. It's Wednesday for you. So on Tuesday, for you all, we were talking about Jesus' crucifixion, his actual death. And we had discussed Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And their different accounts. Now we're going to read out of John. Like I've said, the fact that the four gospel writers all tell the same basic information, but maybe a smidge different, actually proves it. You know, if you have somebody who's telling you the exact same story word for word, you're going to be like, yep, that was rehearsed, that was practiced. But if it's close, but with some slight differences, then you can be like, okay, that's really true. They're writing it from four different perspectives, four different, they may have seen it different, heard it different, whatever. Also, something else to keep in mind when you're reading John is John wrote his gospel, the latest. He wrote his after the other three had been written. So he's kind of filling in any gaps that maybe the other three gospel writers didn't think to put in. And he's probably read the other three gospel writers and is going back and writing his. Also, he was closer to Jesus, so that might give him some insight that some of the other gospel writers don't have. Remember, his is not considered a synoptic gospel like the other three are, which means he didn't write his necessarily in the chronological order it happened. So that's what we're reading out of today, is John. John 19. 16. Finally, Pilate handed him over to them to be crucified. So the soldiers took charge of Jesus, carrying his own cross. Now, he's the only one that gives this detail, but we talked about this before, that it started out with him carrying his own cross. And we don't know if he was carrying the full cross or just this cross beam, but he was carrying his cross. But remember, at this point, he is a bloody mess. So he's not able to carry it for very long before he's just not able. And so the soldiers grabbed Simon of Cyrene and forced him to carry it, which is that song that I said you could listen to yesterday. Carrying his own cross, he went out to the place of the skull, which in Aramaic is called Golgotha. Here they crucified him, and with him 2 others, one on each side and Jesus in the middle. Luke is the gospel writer that includes the most about the conversation between the two other criminals on the cross and Jesus. Pilate had notice prepared and fastened to the cross. It read, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. Many of the Jews read this sign for the place where Jesus was crucified near the city, and the sign was written in Aramaic, Latin, and Greek. We've talked about this some, but it was not, this was very intentional, that Jesus died when he died. Because if at all possible, all Jewish people were to go to Jerusalem for the Passover, which means Jerusalem would have been packed. I read somewhere, heard somewhere, I mean, we could be talking up to 1 million people that would have been in Jerusalem. And so the fact that Jesus was crucified right outside of Jerusalem means there would be lots and lots and lots of people that would have seen it and heard it, and the whole city would have heard about it. And a lot of people would have walked by, because that's what Romans did. When they crucified somebody, they crucified them someplace so that it would be seen, so that everybody would see it, know what was going on. It was kind of like a big sign, don't do this or you're going to end up on a cross like this guy did. And so Pilate had not really wanted to crucify Jesus. He had tried time and time again to not have to crucify Jesus. But he ends up having to crucify him. So this is kind of Pilate's kind of last jab. He's not willing to take on directly the Jews, but he's going to make this final jab by making this sign that says King of the Jews, and putting it in a language that pretty much everybody is going to be able to read, because the three major languages of the time were Aramaic, Latin, and Greek. So the fact that this sign was written in all three means everybody's going to be able to read it. The chief priest of the Jews protested to Pilate, "Don't write the King of the Jews," but this man claimed to be the King of the Jews. Pilate answered, "What I have written, I have written." In other words, this is his final jab. Get over it. I'm at least doing this much. When the soldiers crucified Jesus, they took his clothes, dividing them into 4 shares, one for each of them, with the tunic remaining. This garment was seamless, woven in one piece from top to bottom. "Let's not tear it," they said to one another. "Let's decide by lot who will get it." In other words, they were basically, it's like a dice game that they would have used to decide it, which fulfilled Scripture. This happened that the Scripture might be fulfilled, which said, "They divided my garments among them and cast lots for my clothing." So that's what the soldiers did. Near the cross of Jesus stood his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother there and the disciple whom he loved standing by. Remember, John always calls himself the disciple whom Jesus loved, which you could take as a way of, as some of you have mentioned, could be kind of like taken as a jab that he was closer to Jesus than everybody else. But most commentaries take it as a way of him being humble. Instead of calling out that, hey, I'm the one who was there. I'm the one that was the closest. I'm the one that didn't run off. He calls himself the disciple whom Jesus loved, knowing that Jesus loved all the disciples. But remember, by this point, all the disciples had disappeared. Peter had stayed close until he denied Jesus for the 3rd time, and then he took off running as well. So by this point, all the disciples have scattered, except John. So John and his mom, Mary, are standing at the cross. "Dear woman, here is your son. And to the disciple, here is your mother." From that time on, this disciple took her into her home. I never take the time to read my little cheat notes here in my study Bible, but I like them. Why did Jesus assign Mary's care to one of his disciples instead of his brothers? Jesus, because he was the firstborn, was expected to care for the family after his father died. We pretty much are pretty sure that Joseph has died by this point. Sometime between when Jesus was 12 and the whole, temple, being left behind at the temple thing, and 30 when he started his ministry, we're pretty sure Joseph dies. So that means the responsibility to care for the family would have fallen on Jesus as the oldest son. His brothers, as we've talked about before, at this point, think he's crazy. So they're probably not going to show up at his crucifixion. They probably are in Jerusalem as good Jews, but they're probably not going to show up at his crucifixion. So Jesus is going to take care of his mom. And keep in mind, He's in excruciating pain. He is struggling to breathe, and he's still going to take some of those last breaths to take care of his mother. And that's one of your that's one of your extra credit memory verses. Dear woman, behold your son, and to the disciple, behold your mother. Later, knowing that all was now completed, and so that the scripture would be fulfilled. Once again, here we go with the scripture being fulfilled. Jesus said, I am thirsty, or I thirst, is what it has on the sheet. Another one of your extra credit memory verses. I thirst, John 19:28. A jar of wine vinegar was there, so they soaked a sponge in it, put the sponge on a stalk of the hyssop plant, and lifted it to Jesus' lips. Once again, there's some symbolism going on here. As we said, Jesus is the perfect Passover lamb. And that goes back to the Passover angel passing over the door frames of the Hebrews when the 10th plague hit Egypt. And it passed over the door frames of the people who had painted the lamb's blood on the door frame. I can speak. What they would have painted the blood on the door frames with was a hyssop plant. And here we see the hyssop plant is what's being used to hand Jesus the sponge with the liquid on it. When he had received the drink, Jesus said, it is finished. With that, he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. It is finished is the first one. That one you have to know because it's 3 words and it's huge. This word here, finished, is in the original Greek would have been a business transaction. Finished. It is the word that they would have used when a contract was sealed, when a business deal was done, over with. This is the it is finished that they would have used. Loses some in its translation to English. Jesus is saying the business deal is done. I have paid for all of the sins of the world. My death, the death of the perfect Lamb. Back to what John said at the very beginning. Behold the Lamb of the world. The Lamb of the world has died. He has paid the ultimate sacrifice for the sins of the world. It is finished. Business deal done. He has overcome. He has paid the price. Now it was the day of preparation, and the next day was to be a special Sabbath. Because the Jews did not want the bodies left on the crosses during the Sabbath, they asked Pilate to have the legs broken and the bodies taken down. Normally, the Romans have no problem with leaving the bodies up on the cross. Actually, they like to leave the bodies up on the cross. Once again, this whole thing of a big sign. Don't do what these people did or this is what's going to happen to you. So they like to just leave them up on the crosses. And even if they did bring them down off the crosses, they normally didn't bury them. The Romans didn't. I think the Romans burned the bodies. Jews are the ones who bury the bodies. But it's the Friday before their Sabbath, and it was to be a special Sabbath because it was part of Passover week. So it's a special Sabbath because it's the Sabbath of Passover week. So they don't want the body still hanging on the cross because according to Old Testament scriptures, Old Testament law, it would have been a curse to leave it hanging on the tree. So the bodies needed to come down. So they asked Pilate to have the legs broken and the bodies taken down. Remember, the way crucifixion works is you cannot breathe because everything is pushing down. So you cannot breathe unless you push yourself up to get a breath. Well, if they come along and break the legs, people aren't going to be able to push themselves up to get a breath. So that's one way that they make, the Romans would make crucifixion even more painful. And in this case, at least, make it quicker. So the soldiers came and broke the legs of the first man who had been crucified with Jesus, and then those of the other. But when they came to Jesus and found that he was already dead, they did not break his legs. Once again, fulfilling Old Testament scripture. There is Old Testament scripture, I'm pretty sure in Isaiah, that said that his bones would not be broken. Also, once again, making it very clear that he is the perfect Passover lamb. Because back to Passover, in Exodus, it makes it clear that the lamb's bones were not to be broken. The lamb was to be roasted whole, that the bones were not to be broken. Jesus's bones were not broken like the other two because he was already dead. Instead, they stabbed a spear in him. Let me see here. Got two things going on here at one time. So they did not break his legs. Instead, one of the soldiers pierced Jesus' side with a spear, bringing a sudden flow of blood and water. As I read this morning in my Bible study, I was like, oh, I never thought of it that way. The reason why he did that was probably to confirm to the watching crowd that Jesus was dead. One of the soldiers thrust the spear into Jesus' side. Scientists tell us that the blood and water that then came out are further proofs of the physical death, because more than likely fluid was building up around the heart, and when they stuck the spear, they probably stuck it in like around the ribs and went up into the heart, and that's what was flowing out. The man who saw it has given testimony, and his testimony is true. He knows that he tells the truth, and he testifies so that you also may believe. This is probably John saying that, hey, I saw this really happened. Later, Joseph of Arimathea asked Pilate for the body of Jesus. Now, Joseph was a disciple of Jesus, but secretly because he feared the Jews. And as we'll see in other ones, Joseph of Arimathea was part of the council, and had probably been following Jesus for a while, but had been doing it all in secret, because he could have gotten in a lot of trouble, kicked out of his position in the Sanhedrin, kicked out of the synagogue, lots of things, if he had been openly following Jesus. So he now comes and asks for Jesus's body. This was huge. This means that Joseph is now coming out of the dark. He's no longer going to be secretly following Jesus. He's openly following Jesus. And he's going to a Roman official and asking for permission to bury the body when the Romans don't bury the body. He's kind of going both against Roman custom and standing up to the Romans, and also standing up to the Jewish ruling council that he was part of. So this was a huge deal on Joseph's part. He was accompanied by Nicodemus, the man who had earlier come to talk to Jesus in the dark. Nicodemus, is part of his conversation with Nicodemus, between Nicodemus and Jesus, is where we get John 3:16. We talked about that earlier. I think it was on LMS, but Nicodemus is now coming out of the dark as well. He's also part of the Jewish ruling council. He's also coming out of the dark and saying, hey, I follow Jesus, and I'm going to take care of his body. So they brought about 75 pounds of spices, wrapped up his body with the spices and strips of linens. This was in accordance with Jewish burial customs. At the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden a new tomb in which no one had ever been laid. Because it was the Jewish day of preparation, and since the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there. I had never given this any thought either until somebody pointed it out to me this year. Jesus had to be buried in a tomb that everybody knew where it was. Because if he came back from the dead and there was no empty tomb, it wouldn't have the same significance. But because everybody knew he was buried in this tomb, and it was an empty tomb, so there could be no body confusion, everybody would be like, yeah, he's alive. This tomb is completely empty. It was an empty tomb. There was a body. Now it's empty. I'm going to make it a little bit harder for people to be like, don't think so. I thought there was something else I wanted to say, but I guess not. So that's John's take on the whole burial. I know there's something in Matthew I want to write about the burial. Nothing else in Luke really. Mark. The other thing I wanted to say is, as I said, it's preparation day before the Sabbath when Jesus is crucified and buried. Sabbath was the day of rest. There's day of rest. Then Sunday would have been would have been the celebration of first fruits. And if you think back to the video, they make a point of Jesus was resurrected on first fruits, which would have been kind of the ending of the whole Passover celebration. So the Sabbath was a special Sabbath because it was part of the whole Passover celebration. We'll talk more about that Thursday. All right. Here we go. Matthew 27. As evening approached, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who had himself become a disciple of Jesus. Going to Pilate, he asked for Jesus' body. Pilate ordered that it had been given to him. Joseph took the body, wrapped it up, and all that. Mary Magdalene and the other were sitting there opposite the tomb. The next day, the one after preparation day, the chief priests and the Pharisees went to Pilate. Sir, they said, we remember that while he was still alive, that deceiver said, after 3 days I will rise again. So give the order for the tomb to be made secure until the third day. Otherwise his disciples may come and steal the body and tell the people that he has been raised from the dead. This last deception will be worse than the first. Take a guard, Pilate answered. Go, make the tomb as secure as you know how. So they went and made the tomb secure by putting a seal on the stone and posting the guard. Like I said, today is Monday for me, so I just finished grading everything from last week. I don't know what happened on Thursday, but I am missing a whole bunch of Thursday videos. So, and I have it on the classroom wall who I'm missing. So if I am missing a Thursday video paragraph from you, get that fixed. We'll go over this again tomorrow, but this is the last 7 words. You have to come in and write down, it is finished, John 19:30. My God, why have you forsaken me? Matthew 27:46. And Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. Luke 23:34. That will get you the full credit. If you don't give me the scripture and where it is in the Bible, you're not going to get the full credit. You got to give me both the scripture and where it is to get the full credit. Then, for extra credit, you can give me just 4 or just 5 or just 6 or just 7 or any combination of them. 4 is Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. Luke 23:46. 5, today you will be with me in paradise. Luke 23:34. 6, dear women, behold your son. And to the disciple, behold your mother. John 19:26-27. And 7, I thirst. John 19:28. Doesn't really matter about the order because I just kind of randomly stuck them in that order. That's not necessarily the order that they were said. It is finished probably was the last one. But aside from that, order means nothing. So they don't have to be in that order. But that is your memory verse quiz on Friday. As of right now, I am still saying I'm going to see you in person tomorrow, Thursday. You know, things change from one second to the next. But I was talking to Shane today, and he said that's what Mr. Hess had said as far as electives and stuff, is that you all will be back on Thursday, which doesn't help with electives. But so, also, don't forget about literature. Got a lot of literature missing. Don't forget about history. See you tomorrow.